staying with us. And I think what has been or become clear very much is that generative AI, as with every technological novelty, in fact, is a tool, and it depends on us how we want to use this tool. We can use it as a knife to cut ourselves while we prepare a dish, but we can also use the knife to prepare a new and very yummy, innovative dish. And our two panelists, Christina and Peter, have also brought some food for thought for us. They have prepared some presentations to take us on a journey what you can do today and what you might be doing tomorrow with generative AI in use. And I think, Christina, would you want to...
I could start, I think. We have plugged in the laptop, so maybe you can already... Can you switch to the slides already? Or should we use another? Yes, perfect, that's mine. Okay, this is all almost visible, I would say. So, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and to give you some more concrete ideas and examples on how we might be able to use AI in newsrooms to create a more nuanced and more wider journalistic work in the end. I always say we might be able, because of course this is also a management decision process, and I'm not quite sure if this will be done everywhere in the right direction, but let's hope. One first thing, just to start with the why, I think it's really important to consider that that we really have some problems to solve, some things to do, and this is about like the change in the digital infrastructure system, where more and more people are reading news and accessing news via other platforms. It's a quite dynamic landscape, and also we have business pressure and normative needs that we are not really meeting right now that well. So there's lots to be done. And of course, we also have to consider that there are really great potentials and also limits of AI-driven systems. You've heard about many of them in the talk that Charlie just gave us. So this is just a bit, in addition, also emphasizing on the biases that we see in AI-driven systems and algorithms. They tend to learn also these distortions from their training data, for example, and then amplifying them. We also need a much better alignment of our core values in journalism, but also in general in society with these systems. It's possible to teach them fairness, but you have to really think about how to do it, and you have to choose one model of fairness in the end. And also, I mean, they can support really individual learning environments, for example, but we also have to really be aware of the phenomenon that we see them as not human beings, but conscious beings in many cases. So anthropomorphism is really a thing. I think you can all agree that sometimes we say thank you to ChatGPT. In my case, this happens quite often, and this is the best moment to show that. As a first approach that I just want to shed light on, we could use generative AI and also other AI-driven systems to really include more diverse perspectives and more perspectives into the everyday reporting. You might already know this double diamond model that we use in design thinking processes quite often, where we have a broader and a more narrow process at some stages. But of course, this is quite effort consuming, and you can't do that in your everyday reporting. Sometimes you have to get the article out in a few hours, and you would not be able to do a design thinking process with bringing in people and collecting user feedback and stuff like that. So this would not be possible. But what you can do is you can use generative AI to have conversations with artificial readers. And I would say that, I mean, given that this should not be a way to replace real conversations with real humans, of course, this is really important, but you can learn from them, you can train your models to give you answers on how specific topics might or might not be reported in a way that they really get something out of it, that it's really helpful for them, that it's really something that has an impact. And I just experimented with ChatGPT a little bit, with GPT-4. This is even possible with a system that is not trained to do that, but of course the results will be much better if you train several models, for example, to represent several reader groups or target groups, especially those that are not present in the newsroom. I think this is quite an important point. The role of a single mother, for example, living in a small flat in Dortmund is maybe not the person that you have in your newsroom, and you should be able to get their perspective in your process. The second approach is all about data-driven journalism, which is also my core field of work. I think we could use AI and huge models in this field much more to also report relevant news topics in a more differentiated way, really to go deep into the regional field and also to the things that people are experiencing in their everyday life. Interesting effects. Okay, let's see where we end. This is just coming down. So this is one example by Bayerischer Rundfunk. They investigated the heat zones in cities, and they used satellite data for that, and were only able to really collect and analyze these satellite data sets with the help of AI algorithms. But then you can, of course, zoom in and you find really different results regarding your neighborhood. You also find maybe solutions. So these investigations are also helpful to find the outliers and the things that you maybe want to report on as a good example in the end. And the third topic or approach would be to really use AI algorithms, not only generative AI, but also in general, to do a journalism more specific to user needs and situations. This is a graphic that was, I think, triggered by the New York Times team that developed the audio app, and they had the daily news routines of their audiences and mapped it and saw, okay, there are some specific parts of the day where we can get in and really do something valuable for those people with audio content. And I think this really leads us to a concept that is called structured journalism, where we try to, and this is something that is really, I think, on the map or has been on the map for something like 10 years or so. And with technology and AI, this becomes more and more possible to disassemble journalism into modules, into pieces, also, of course, in the concepts of the formats, and then reassemble those and also change the formats to really meet personal usage situations and needs on a really personalized level. And this can, I think, also be quite helpful. If you want to know more about those examples, you can find many of them on the website of the BBC News Labs. They are really working on that topic for quite a long time. With AI systems, we could, of course, for example, change the formats quite easily. So to sum it up a little bit, I think, or as I see it, the process, how journalism serves the public so far has quite been a bit narrow, I would say, because of course people are doing it, and not everyone is really there in the newsroom. You don't have all the groups represented there, so it's quite narrow, and in the end we want to serve a quite diverse audience. So how is that even made to work or mean to work? So in the end, I think we can use technology if it's used in a good way, in a meaningful way, with sound management decisions, of course, to broaden this process and to bring in many more perspectives in the end to really meet the specific needs that people have. Because, of course, in the technological landscape that we are in, people are used to hyper-personalized content. They are used to getting the Spotify recommendations, for example, YouTube and Netflix and so on. They are all doing it, and why shouldn't journalism also use this technology to better serve their audiences? Ah, interesting. I think this has been said by Charlie so far. I just wanted to end on the constructive note and ask, okay, what now? What can we do now to get there? I think a topic that has not really been named is infrastructure. This is really not the nicest thing to work on, as I've experienced in my working life. But we would need much more much better metadata, for example, and better archives, better management of knowledge resources in the newsroom to be able to work with these concepts on a day-to-day basis. But so far, I think we will discuss it further. These just have been some ideas that maybe give you a more concrete view on what might happen if we do it in a good way in the end. So, many thanks. And I hope that this...
And let's see. And also, if you have questions for Christina, of course, you can ask her after the panel. There will be enough time. And with this, I'm handing over to Peter, who has also brought some food for thought for us.
Thank you very much. Yes, as mentioned, my name is Peter, and I represent the Constructive Institute in Aarhus. So I actually don't represent a media. I'm also not a journalist. I'm not even a technical person within AI, but I'm here because we have done some experimentation. And so I will say, if you want to consider all of the implications of AI, revisit Charlie's presentation. If you want to see how it's used responsibly, look at Christina's presentation. And I will now give you one example of how you can actually utilize it. So first of all, thank you for having us here. And also, this reminds me of going back 1 year. We had an amazing conference here together with our friends from Bonn. So really what we do at the Constructive Institute is we try to like Ellen and her crew, we try to promote constructive journalism and help newsrooms transition into more constructive journalism. And I also have a presentation that I think should be able to come up now, or do I need to do anything else with my computer? No. Oh, I will take that. AI.
Can ChatGPT translate this, please?
Yes, okay. So how do you actually use these kind of things? First of all, I will try to be very quick because many of the points that I actually want to make have already been made by my two fellow presenters here. When we say AI, since the launch of ChatGPT, it has almost become synonymous with a chatbot. And I think that is a great problem because it narrows down the debate. And we all want a chatbot, but really that shouldn't be what we're talking about. So AI holds the capability of reproducing or mimicking human actions and doing it computer-powered very efficiently. And that's what we need to tap into. So why are we here? So one of the reasons we are all here is because we share a concern about journalism, right? So we see failing business models. As Ellen was mentioning, we see failing trust. And more recently, one of the big topics we talk about is growing news avoidance. So the product we offer to the market actually turns people away from the exact product that we are bringing to market. So this is, of course, why we all think that constructive journalism has a role to play. I won't go into too much details. I think this will also be a magnificent window for our friends at the Reuters Institute, but because many people will probably show you some of their numbers, but it speaks its own language. People want to combat the negativity, they want more solutions, and they need more nuanced content. So this quote comes in many iterations. The problem is that right now, if we want to serve a community that wants more constructive journalism, we also need to know how we actually measure if we do what they are looking for. And if you can't change what you can't measure. So the problem we set out to solve was to see, can we challenge some of the conventions in this area? So many of the KPIs you see in the dashboards in newsrooms, it's click rates, it's reading times, it's conversion rates, etc. So what the large language models now allow us is to measure things that we could not measure before. So we can now take massive amounts of text and we can turn that into data. And for us, this presents a new way of quantifying what we label quality, and we have to be a little careful with that word because even if journalism tries to be constructive, it doesn't necessarily mean always that it's the best quality, but at least it addresses the value sets we're looking for. So what we have done very practically is we have built on one of the large language models, one of Google's language models. We have then made what you call a fine-tuning. So we have built an algorithm based on data points from more than 3,000 news articles that is now able to classify an article for constructiveness. So this obviously poses a number of questions, and I want to highlight a few before we go into the discussions. So first of all, ethics and transparency. When we set out to do this task, we did not want to do all of the things we are now accusing the big tech companies of doing. So we have a sound ethical approach. We know exactly why we do the things we do. We want to make sure that we have diversity in our models. We want to make sure to avoid the biases we can avoid. But more than anything, we want to be transparent. So I will be able to tell you exactly what kind of data we have in our model. I will be able to tell you exactly how we trained the model, etc. Then data quality. So right now, the only people who are allowed to train the data we put into our model are fellows with the Constructive Institute in Aarhus. So we have a fellowship program. People attend us for 10 months. They are trained, and these are the only people we allow to do our coding. So they will go through articles, and they will classify them. And right now, we have a model that is as capable of classifying as one of our fellows. And then lastly, opening the black box. Charlie was also hinting at that. So one thing is when you actually do the right things. When you have models that work, it's magnificent. We all know of all of the wonders of ChatGPT, but where the interesting discussions lies are actually when it makes mistakes. So we spend quite a lot of time, and we can do that because we don't do this to compete with either Google or OpenAI. We spend quite a lot of time looking at all of the times our analyses fail. Like what causes these kind of biases? And I think that's very important. And I think we should also put pressure on the big tech companies to do much more explainable AI. So how can this be applied in a newsroom? Very practically, this is a mock-up. We are still developing the tool in collaboration with probably some of the people in this room today. But obviously, we see this as a supplement to journalism, to the journalists that are there. So this is supposed to be an editorial tool, a monitoring tool that can give you sort of a health check of your website. So you will be able to see how many constructive stories do you have, and you can do additional breakdowns into themes. You can look into, is it solutions-oriented? And you can also imagine that you want to look at, for example, at diversity profiles. So I think my ending note before we turn into the discussion is that this is a time to be optimistic. There are plenty of things we need to talk about, a lot of concerns, but at the same time, this is really an opportunity for us to do better journalism. We can create amazing tools that help us support journalism. And I also think this holds great potential in terms of democratizing the news and making news accessible for people and groups that didn't have access to that kind of news before. But obviously, there are a number of concerns we need to address. And I don't think I'll go into details because I'm sure Astrid will take us through all of those things. Sure.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you everyone for being so optimistic. And I've just decided that I'm going to take on the persona of the grumpy German journalist asking some questions. And I would like to start with you, Christina. I think it's very fascinating, this glimpse into the future that you gave us, that we will be able to really write very personalized, contextualized articles that will cater to our audience's needs. At the same time, this reminded me of a presentation that I saw this summer at Stanford University, where a professor was really pointing the finger into the wound and saying that's exactly the way how bad actors are using narrative wedging to manipulate voters maybe next year. So what do we do in journalism? How can we really establish this line, what we will do and what we won't? How do you think about that? And I would ask all of you this question.
In the end, I think when it comes to personalization, I think we are really used to seeing that in social media, for example, and on platforms where it's really not used in a good way and according to the journalistic core values. And I think this is the main, or should be also within the core of every strategic process and question. So how do we deal with it now? So is this in alignment with our goals and the societal role of journalism? And then I think if we, for example, do personalization but keep the really most important news, of course, within the news mix in the end. I mean, we can really create the systems. We don't have to do it like Facebook does it or like YouTube would do it. So then, I mean, of course, it's possible to do it in a different way and to align it with our core values. But we have to be aware that it's not that easy to operationalize these values into technical systems. So that's really something where you can, where you can really think about for years. Yeah.
I know, Peter, that you have a very strong opinion on this.
Yeah. So what I want to say is that this is, for me, this is not something new. We know this. This also, for me, is a reflection on the whole echo chamber discussion we've had for some years, and we shouldn't be naive. This will happen. Already now, there are certainly many people looking to build AI tools that will create the perfect personalized experience for me. And that is exactly the reason why I think we need to insist that journalism needs to play a role also as curators. So we in this room, I suspect most of us are in the journalism space, we are the domain experts. So we need to insist that we have a role as curators still, even if we can build AI tools that can make perfect personalizations. So for me, this is also an ethical thing that we have to insist in the journalistic core values, because these tools will come.
You have also been talking about ethical guidelines, and I think that's one of the first steps that most newsrooms have taken or are taking right now. Is there like a core imperative that you would want to pass on if people start thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, you hope there's a kind of continuity there, which is that ethics hasn't suddenly emerged because of AI. You know, the ethics are supposed to have been in journalism for some time, and the better news organizations perhaps didn't call it ethics. They just said, this is our editorial policy, this is our standards and our values or whatever, or this is the way we do things. We want to be accurate, we want to be reliable and accountable and all those kind of things. So in that sense, I don't see much change. Personally, I am less worried about the personalization bit. Firstly, because it doesn't work very well. Even if you wanted to force feed somebody just one thing, it doesn't work. Or if you try to guess exactly what you wanted every time, it doesn't work, because humans are human. And the machine is still very limited in its ability to understand sentiment, etc. Also, I think that we worry, frankly, too much about so-called echo chambers or filter bubbles. Firstly, the research tells us that people who go online for news tend to get a much greater variety of sources and perspectives. In fact, they get too many. That's the main problem. They go online and there's somebody saying, hey, I've got a different point of view, you must listen to it. Or I'm really worried about this other thing that you should be worried about. So there's actually too much. There's a plurality, I think, which can be frictional. And also that your filter bubble, I mean, you're in a filter bubble, right? I am just a very, characterful person with a very strong identity. I love my filter bubble. I'm a West Ham fan, for example, as a football team. I don't want to hear lots of news about Arsenal or Tottenham or Bayern and so on. That's my interest. That's who I am. And so I think in that sense, optimization, the positive optimization, will be what it always was, which is what journalism has always tried to do, trying to create news content in formats that are accessible, entertaining, and relevant and trustworthy. And over time, I think, again, a little bit of optimism, that yes, of course, you're absolutely right. The bad people are going to personalize stuff and try and get you attracted to your worst instincts, if you like. But I think generally people have this relationship with news brands. I'm amazed how legacy news brands have survived. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we all thought, that half of the newspapers, even somewhere like Germany, would disappear. Oh no, they have not. There are actually more influential than they were in the past, in some ways. Or they at least have more attention than they used to have in the past. Whether they control the agenda or not, I don't know. And perhaps that's a good thing that they don't, you know.
Peter, you wanted to
Yeah,
say?
no, but just a short comment and maybe a slight pushback to some of the things you're saying, because I completely agree. And I think most of the people in this room, if not all of the people in this room, are perfectly capable of navigating news and also, you know, building positive echo chambers to some extent. The problem is, and I think we constantly need to remind ourselves that we are talking about two other groups. First of all, the young people who will grow up with a completely new idea of what media is and what brand loyalty is. You know, when I look at my 13-year-old son, he doesn't have anywhere near the same perception of brand loyalty, and I think we will see a shift. Legacy media will probably still survive, but they will be much less dependent on their brand. It will be, you know, the presenters, formats, etc. And I want to be careful not to sound patronizing here, but again, we can navigate the news space, but all of the people who are news providers, they are really the ones we need to be careful about, because they will get, you know, the easy personalized option, and they may not know that it doesn't work very well. They may have a flawed version, but that's all that they will have access to. And that's why, again, I think we need to insist that we as journalists, we are the ones that help curate that. And we force feed to some extent, even though it sounds very negative, but we force feed some of these things. And so my biggest concern is actually that we have an A and a B team. The A team is not the one that just have access to AI. We will all have access to AI. But the A teams are the ones that have access to AI and the curator. Not only in journalism, also legal advice. Because you can go and ask ChatGPT for legal advice, but can you rely on it? No, you need the human touch to interpret, right? So the A teams are the ones that have access to the wonderful AI tools, but also people who can actually navigate it a little better than the average. And the B team are the ones that just have access to the tools, but have to rely on them and maybe not have that critical or that literacy.
Yeah, and in a sense, that kind of is a great example, Peter, isn't it, of how, you know, technologies can change things. I'd argue a lot of these new technologies have, in a sense, democratized. I don't mean politically, but access. But of course, often they will replicate existing, inequalities. And so, for example, in the analog era, the elite was much more literate about how to negotiate state instruments. You know, the elite were always better at getting value out of education, health systems, business systems. They were always better at that. And new technologies, I don't think, changed that particularly. You know, they in either direction. But you're absolutely right that that's the underlying.
I mean, we can also use them to make them visible, like in your monitoring system, for example, where you can use it to make visible the perspectives that are missing, where we have distortions in the reporting, for example. This can be quite useful, but if we want to prevent that, and if we want to create the systems in a good way, we have to think about what they exactly should do, like how should certain groups be represented. So you really have to operationalize this, and this is really a hard topic.
And that's what I loved about your project, Peter, you know, that it's such a useful way for people to understand how their journalism is working. And I think that's the biggest, never mind AI, the biggest change in journalism over the last 30 years has been we now know what the audience does. We now have a relationship with the audience, which we never had. When I was a television maker, program maker, you got audience figures, and sometimes you'd do panel groups or something, and it was rubbish, frankly. You know, even the Reuters survey, which is a survey. I mean, I love Reuters, I love their survey, but they just ask people. They say, "What do you think about the news?" And of course, people lie when they answer surveys, but we have real data about what they really do. I remember one brilliant German, I mustn't identify it, a German news app where they gave you a choice. You know, I'm interested in international affairs, social justice issues, and mega economics. And then they looked at what they were clicking on, and it was football, celebrity, and so on. So what they did was they took away the my bit. They took away the choice. And the readers or the users were really angry about that. They said, give us back the choice. They said, all right, you can have your choice. And then they ignored it. So that you had the buttons and you pushed them, but they were still serving you the stuff that you really liked. You know, so it's very difficult. But I think you're absolutely right, Christina, that making this visible, making our journalism more visible, really is quite shocking for people. And we've had lots of people working on debiasing tools with our project. It's very, very difficult to do. And I love your project as well, because you're being conscious of, even when you're trying to debias, there's a bias. You know, so I love the way you're doing that. It's great.
But what if media brands and journalism will actually lose visibility and also lose touch with their audience? Because if we think into this future where everyone will use the chatbots and they will give them a concrete answer, just a snippet, already now lots of media houses are worrying that they will lose a lot of reach because no one is going to click on their website or whatever it is anymore. So have you heard any constructive solutions about how to work around this, I think, very big disruption for a lot of media houses?
I would question if it's really going to be that way, because what we see at Bing, for example, is that, of course, you have a conversation with the search engine, but then in the end you also get sources. So journalism has to push to be one source that is named there. So this might be also a technical question, but also, about really showing what you do, making transparent how your process is, what your efforts are to verification and stuff like that. So which sources do you use? But we will have to find out how this works. And also, I would not say that in 10 years we are using search engines the way we do it today. I mean, they will be more or less maybe audio assistants. So this could also be another way where media houses get in, especially those who are working with audio already. But also you could use, of course, AI to create synthetic audio. But in the end, I think this will change a little bit quite as well. And also there will be so much synthetic audio and also media content on the web that is not labeled as being synthetic. I would assume that journalism in 5 years is more important than ever for people who need really good sources on this internet that is full of just things that are made up. And this could also be a way to make journalism more important.
What have you heard from all the people that you talk to? How do they want to make their journalism more visible in this sea of actually rubbish, artificial rubbish?
Yeah, and I agree completely with Christina that I don't think it's going to be quite so awful. And this is also part of a trend that's been going on for some time. And when we think about Google search, Google search used to be a nice link that went straight back to your website, and that at least meant there was a chance that people would come back to you. And then they brought in the snippets, so you got the first paragraph, and often that was enough to give people what they needed. And I think this sort of basically, the other trend that we've seen in news is this idea of creating a more subscription or membership brand that is much more related to providing a service to the audience or the readers. And I think that's going to be accelerated by this. People will still say, okay, I'm, a very intellectual person who probably works in, academia or finance, and therefore I'm going to read AFZ, because they know me, and they understand it. And I think that, ChatGPT or whatever won't have that ability. And also, we can just see that it's not as good at understanding what's happening in the world. It just reformulates language or imagery. Understanding what is happening in the world and why it matters or doesn't matter is very much more about judgment. People they don't pay for journalism content as such, they pay for your judgment. Why do you think this is important? I think this is such, again, an opportunity for more constructive journalism, that you can provide that holistic thing. You can ask ChatGPT, what are the 5 things I should do to, clean up my energy consumption at home? It will probably just kind of do that, but it doesn't have any dynamic understanding of why you should do that, or what might you do that's more imaginative. It might help you with that process. So I think, that in the end, journalism is very much threatened. When I talk to big executives, this is their greatest fear, And I think Peter alluded to this as well, which is that if you like, the more casual consumer of journalism will become more distant from news organizations, you know, especially in countries which lack public service media that we enjoy in Germany and UK, for example.
Before we open the round for your questions, I would just like to dive a little bit into this whole dynamics between media houses and the big tech platforms. As you said in your presentation, the technology, again, is mostly being made by US tech companies. The media industry has had a difficult relationship with them in the past, and I think after the invention of the internet and after the rise of social media in the end, most of the news houses have been, in a way, like hurt. They have lost lots of business and also value. How should media houses now think about this? Should they give away their data for free to OpenAI? Should they sue them? Should they negotiate with them? Or should they build their own systems? Because all of it is happening right now. It seems a little bit uncoordinated. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, so first of all, don't sue too much. Don't give away data. We have to find ways of building collaboration. So Charlie had everybody sort of giggling when you said this is supported by the Google News Initiative. We need to be super careful, but I'm going to say something that is probably slightly controversial. These tech companies exist in the world, and they have put a lot of money into this world. A lot of the people over the years that I have talked to in both Meta, Facebook at the time, Google, have been extremely, really care about quality journalism. Obviously, we need to be super careful because they have a boss that have a boss, and then very close thereafter is Mark Zuckerberg, and he answers to his shareholders. But we have to collaborate with them. Also because we can't build our own language models. The infrastructure doesn't exist. Well, it does, but we can't buy it because they already pretty much bought everything. So we have to build on those tools. So I think we need to put pressure from a legislative point of view. So this is where I'm really hoping that EU now really starts to do what we both hoped and feared that it would do, to use all of its bureaucratic muscles. And then at the same time, I also think we have a huge responsibility to develop our own tools. And that's why we did it. Again, we are the domain experts. We are the ones that have to sort of fine-tune these models to have them reflect better journalism. Because right now, if we ask or make a chatbot, it is built on current and past data. And that is the exact data that has pulled people away from journalism. So we have to reinvent this.
Yeah, I totally agree what you said about collaborations, but I would say that it's not impossible to build own models. I mean, there are open source models that you could further train, for example, where you could put in different training data sets. But the collaboration with tech companies, for example, could be also broad, or really added to by other collaborations, for example, with applied sciences. I'm really wondering why this doesn't happen more often. For example, Bloomberg, they built their own Bloomberg GPT together, I think, with someone from Johns Hopkins and also from Bloomberg, but they obviously have those people on board, and they did it and showed and published about it that it's really working for them in a good way. So they know what training data is used within the model. They know about the perhaps biases that come out of it. So these things are possible, I would say, but we need different collaborations. So I know from my time in journalism why it's sometimes inevitable or even helpful to collaborate with Google or with initiatives that are powered by Google. It was for me also quite helpful and really great to be part of this initiative. But in the end, there are also other great partners, but maybe they are not involved at this stages.
Do you want to add any thoughts to this?
No, sorry.
Okay. So please raise your hand, and do we have a mic for the audience? Okay. Yes. And please tell us to whom your question is addressed.
I'd like to address a question to the first speaker, but maybe it's for the rest of the panel. What is your preferred feature for AI fact-checking? You mentioned that was the first point that came out in the survey. I use ChatGPT. I pay for the service because I want ChatGPT 4. I really want 5. The problem is it won't tell me the sources. And as a result, it's pretty useless for the scientific work that I'm doing.
As I understand it, that's because it doesn't know the sources, in the sense that it's yeah, exactly. It's made it up in the sense it's a language machine. It's not a truth machine. It doesn't say, it's not like it's going through a library saying, there's the best source. I'm going to take that source and I'm going to take this other one as well. And I would combine it beautifully. It's just doing the whole thing. This is what's revolutionary about it. It's taking the whole of its data, if you like, and then working out what would be the correct response. So in that sense, as I understand it, Christina knows more about this, can correct me, it can't really tell you the source directly. It's a different way of working. So what was the other bit? What was my... Oh, fact-checking, yeah. On the fact-checking thing, it's interesting. I was at a fantastic conference in Cape Town a month ago about... There were not just fact-checkers, but there were more the kind of OSINT-type people. And they made a really good point, which is you can fact-check, and there's research says fact-checking is quite good. It helps some people. It alerts some people who care to when something's dodgy. You know, it's not a bad thing to do. But generally speaking, you're kind of fighting fires, you know, and you're never going to be able to fact-check the universe of the internet. And there's all sorts of reasons why people believe bullshit or share bullshit, even if you tell them it's bullshit, okay? But, interestingly, if you attack the sources, if you find, where's this... Sorry, I'll stop saying bullshit. Where's this fake news coming from? Where's this fake news coming from? It's Russian bots, or it's Chinese bloggers, or it's, you know, some think tank or something, you know, or some crazy guy in an attic in Dortmund, you know. That is much more useful. So being much more forensic about how you address misinformation, rather than saying, oh, we've designed a brilliant machine that can spot it. Because as we've seen with the moderation of social media, what is fake news? Often the worst kind of manipulation, disinformation, isn't fake. It's just taking things out of context or out of perspective. And do you know who does that brilliantly? The people who are best at manipulating facts and putting them into certain narratives and agendas? Journalists. We are brilliant at it. You know, we like to think that we're generally doing it for good. But, you know, it's hypocritical of us to complain. So you can't just say, I don't like that point of view, or I don't think that's the best version, therefore we're going to kill it. And I'm sure as Peter, with his coding, showed, and when my students do this kind of stuff, trying to code for a bias, for example, in various... It's incredibly difficult, because you're starting from a biased perspective, you know. So I don't know what the answer to that was, but it's definitely useful, but it's more complicated. And I think that journalists should concentrate on being havens of accountable narrative, at least.
So would you pay for a service that gave you the sources? That's my...
If I was a journalist, perhaps, but not as a user. Yeah.
You don't have to. They are already there. There are already systems that bring together the generative, like conversational goodness, and also sources like Perplexity AI, for example. Then you have the new search engines. So maybe this is developing in this direction already. And then you also have AI-driven forensic tools for multimedia content. We are working in a project together with the Austrian Institute of Technology. They are developing tools where you can just put in some videos and images, and then they will just look through the metadata and the layers of data within those multimedia contents and spot irregularities, for example. So this can also give you hints, and I think there are many projects now working on this in this field because it's funded quite heavily. Yeah.
A directory would be extremely useful.
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions in the room? There are two here. Would you start in the first row, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your presentations and comments, most interesting. I have a specific question. How far do you believe, or close are we, from an AI that can work as a good editor? And following Peter's experiment, that you give the first version of your story and can give you feedback telling what this story is missing to be a constructive story is this and that in terms of data, sources, or whatever.
No, but from my point of view, we are pretty much there. Obviously, the boring answer is it depends on what you see in a good editor, right? But you would be able, so for example, with our tool, you would be able to write a story, and you could then relate that, and simply by fairly simple search terms, you could relate that to all of, so say you work at the BBC, and you write a story on housing inflation, and you say, okay, my story is not constructive enough. Then you ask the AI to relate it to other stories that you know have been classified as constructive in that field. And then it's up to you. Then either you do the hard work and you read those, whatever, 12 to 1200, how many stories it may be, or you ask a generative component to write a summary. But again, and this is also kind of a comment to the question before, we have to be really sort of careful how we interpret. Like the chatbots, they do not, they do not sort of write to you or answer. It is an algorithm that produces a string of words. So also, we say that they lie or don't lie. Really, they don't. Like, they are agnostic. They predict the next word. So it's a sparring partner, right? And that's where the editorial things come in. So you can ask it to say, write 10 iterations of this article, and then you decide, as the capable constructive journalist, does this live up to my requirements? So yes, the short answer, the long answer, and now in short form, I think we are there to a large extent.
But it's also, I think, a question of accountability and responsibility then. So are you then the one journalist who's in the end responsible for all of that because you don't have an editor, but your AI assistant helped you to decide? I mean, in the end, I would hope that it's more or less the same system that is working today, but with those AI-driven tools that are really helping the editors to bring in more nuanced decisions.
Completely agree. Very important point.
Thank you. And then the gentleman over there.
First the lady.
Yes, Peter said you can change what you can measure. So how do you see the role of editorial analytics tools within the evolution of AI in the newsroom?
So are you thinking about specific tools or the tools that will come in the future?
The tools that are already there, you got. Well, I work at Smart Octo, but you also have Chartbeat or Google Analytics, of course.
I don't think they will become obsolete, and I also think we shouldn't sort of judge them too hard. Click rates and stuff like that, page views, reading times are important. The problem is that if they are the only measures we have, they become the dominating force. So I'll give you one example. Who is to say what is the most important article of the day? Is it the article that is read by 5,000 people that completely changes them and allows them to go out and act and make an informed choice on how they will relate their lives to climate change? Or is it the story that gets 1 million clicks but just, entertains you for 5 minutes? But, it did its job. It also generated some ad revenue, and obviously you need a healthy diet, right? So that's where sort of the health check analogy comes in. I would never go into the world, into a newsroom or out into the world and say everybody needs to write 100% constructive articles all the time. We need a balanced diet as we do in all other parts of the world. The problem is right now we are quite far from that balance. The balance has now tipped in favor of click rates, shares, and stuff that do not necessarily translate into quality, and that's a problem. So, many times I'll use the analogy of fast food. So, say you are at a company, and your job is to supervise the health of your workers. So you then do a survey. You look at the buffet. What do people actually eat? But you compare that with a survey, it's very close to Charlie's analogy of people say, we want a lot of salad, we want more organic food. But when you look at all of the data that comes in, well, people spend 5 minutes and they eat all of the French fries and the desserts. What is your recommendation? Like, obviously, you wouldn't recommend more French fries and dessert, right?
And you said you work at Smart Octo, right? So, because, this hybrid analysis that you did with Dmitry Shishkin on the user needs, I think this is a perfect example how you can really move forward, like bring in those assessments, like human assessments together with the data sets and the results are really, really strong. So there you can really build up evidence. I would recommend it to everyone who has not read the report.
Yeah, can I just say that, just because I do think you yourself represent something that adds value to the existing KPIs.
I think we have time for one more question, and there is one over there.
Is it on? Okay, yeah, thank you. It's a bit of a different question, more organizational, because I work at Deutsche Welle, and we're going through a big change process. And our workforce, I'm just going to call it like this, they are currently concerned with getting from TV to digital. And now there is, again, AI. How would you suggest, are we gonna manage this change? I mean, people are currently losing jobs. And many of my, a little bit older than me, I'm already grasping with it, but there are older colleagues. How would you say, you said the management question is a big one, and I agree with you completely on that. Do you have any ideas? It's really asking a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And I was talking to your colleagues at Deutsche Welle yesterday. I don't know if you were on the call, but I'm spending a lot of time at the moment going into newsrooms, and it's not just generational, actually. Often, I'm often surprised how younger journalists are going, oh my God, you're asking me to do all these different things. You're asking me to be on TikTok and to do, ChatGPT and then cut a package and voice it and know about 6 different topics because you haven't got enough specialist people anymore. So I don't think it's just if you like, more experienced people. Often the more experienced people have been through other changes and they perhaps can process it better. They can think about, well, what do I need to do and how can I, reskill or reorientate? And I think this is part, elsewhere in this conference you're discussing, the stress upon journalists. My partner's a freelance journalist for a national British broadcaster, not the BBC. Her pay, she's freelance, but her pay has not increased in 15 years. And when I say not increased, I mean not even with inflation. So she doesn't give a flying monkeys about kind of AI. She actually sees it as an opportunity that it might enable, and I think this is my optimistic bit, for whatever level you are or in your career, I think it does offer real opportunities to get ahead personally, to be able to manage, for example, the inputs, all those newsletters you sign up to, all those sources, for example, and also then the practical stuff. If you can get across this, then it will show you, save you time and energy. And of course, you all know what happens with that saved time. Your bosses say, can you do 20% more stuff? So that is a negotiation. I guess my main thing would be, I suppose, something like join a union or something. But, I think this is a genuine problem around journalism. And it's partly why I think we have to keep selling, even from a business point of view, the idea that if you want your journalism or your news organization to stand out and add value in an age of machine-like journalism, then you've got to give your staff the chance to get out of the newsroom, talk to somebody, and to do what I call ask the third question. Don't just cut and paste. Give them a chance to not just ask the first question, not even the second one, but the third one, because that's the interesting question in any interview, is the third question. Yes, but, and what are you going to do about it? So that's our task, if you like, is to convince the bosses when they've got their spreadsheets that the human element is going to be their best asset, and the human element is produced by journalists.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe also see that it's really important to shift away resources from the editorial side, at least for the change now, because we need those people at the interfaces to technology, to product, and these should be people with an editorial background because you need the values in those processes. So, and the truth is that then, of course, we won't be able to produce the same content and the same amount of content than before. And also I would embrace learning because I think we had Peter Drucker, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. I think this is something that happens all the time when it comes to technology in newsrooms. You have the editorial side that is just, yeah, that's just taking resources from all the innovative processes all the time, and we have to just embrace that we want to learn, we want to experiment, we want to be curious about these technologies, not uncritical, but we should really see this as a cultural topic as well, I would say.
Well, thank you very much for listening to us, and I think before we all rush to lunch and have some fries and dessert, I think the way the future will play out also depends on the narratives, and I would like to ask our panelists, what is the one thing that people should take away from this conversation and then retell to their colleagues while they have French fries and dessert, why AI and journalism are going to be a good thing together?
So I can start because I will most likely repeat what you just said. The most important thing is the human touch. So will people lose their jobs? Yes, they will. But we will create new jobs. We will reinvent a lot of things in journalism. But what we have to insist is the human touch. The human touch. If we just create an AI journalist that does everything faster and more efficient, we present a solution to a problem that doesn't exist to any news consumers. Nobody wants more, faster, more breaking. People want more engaging, people want more nuances, and they want to be drawn towards solutions. And that needs context. AI can provide some context, but we need the human touch.
Thank you.
Yes, and also I think one narrative that I would really like to change is that AI and technology is just destroying journalism as a force from outside, and we can't do anything about it. So it's decisions that we make and that management is making about how newsrooms are proceeding, and it's also about like seeing this as a complex, fascinating thing. I mean, it's really fascinating in the end, and you can do great things with it. But if your mindset is just confronted with a threat and you are afraid of this big AI thing that will take away our jobs, this is not the mindset where you find and develop new solutions. So we have to think about how to really open our minds and see this as something that is technology. It's neutral. It's our decision how we really manage this, and it's also something that you can create and you can really do great things with it.
Thank you.
I completely agree with what's been said, and they said the most important things. But I would just say one other thing, which is, as I talk to people who are playing with this stuff, it is incredibly creative, potentially. I know there's all these hazards, and we don't usually use that word creative in journalism. It's almost seen as a bad thing. If you're creative, that implies you're somehow making things up, you know. But this idea of thinking differently about how you're doing journalism, I actually find the most interesting aspect to this whole thing. You know, I don't know anything about the technology really. I'm just fascinated by the way it makes you think, why did we used to do journalism like that? Why do we do our journalism like this? In this weird news speak, you know, for example. You know, why don't we know more about things? Why aren't we coming up with fresher narratives? Why aren't we coming up with fresher topics? Why are we missing? If you go and talk to people in a bar, they could be really old people. I just spent a holiday with some very old people. They talk about completely different things to what I talk about as a journalist. Same with young people. You know, they're all talking about things that I've never even heard of. I'm thinking, why isn't that in the news? Now, I'm not saying AI is the solution to this, but it's one way of perhaps enabling us to rejig the way we do journalism. We shouldn't be frightened about that, because from what I can see when people are doing it, it's a lot of fun, and I wish I was doing it myself.
Well, thank you very much, and please give a big applause to our panelists.